Hello, everyone, and Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fahad, and today I'm delighted to be speaking to a very good friend and colleague of mine, Shweta, who I've known for many, many years. The topic of our conversation today is guidance, counseling, and international education. And to introduce Shweta to all of you today, she has over 15 years of experience working as a teacher and as a guidance counselor, and she's lived and worked in over 4 countries and 3 different curricula. So I'm delighted today to welcome Shweta. Hi, how are you, Shweta?
Hi, Fahad. So nice to be able to talk to you, and it's always lovely catching up. I'm fine, absolutely all right. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to having some meaningful conversation, and I hope I can share with whoever is watching or just share my story with you.
Absolutely. So, we're all in lockdown and we're privileged to be sitting in our homes in the safety and comfort of our homes to sort of avoid the COVID-19 and coronavirus pandemic. And, the series of interviews that I'm doing is sort of to connect with my friends across the world, but also to provide an opportunity for us educationists and practitioners to share best practice ideas and sort of solutions. And particularly in your case, obviously you've been working in the international school sector for a number of years, 4 different countries. You must have helped thousands of students across the world. So I'll kickstart the conversation just to find out a little bit about your own background for our audience. How did you enter the world of international education? And how did it all start?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. You're basically asking me about my journey into counseling. This is something that I get asked quite often, and I've realized that my journey is very simple. My story is actually the story of never leaving school. I fell in love with school so much that I decided to make a career out of it. But honestly speaking, the time that I graduated, I was a victim of educational bureaucracy, lack of information, lack of access to information. So when I got into making a career, I did have this at the back of my mind that it is a necessity to bridge the gap between secondary education and tertiary education, bringing that access to students so that they are able to make a right decision, a right choice. They have the bank of information and they can opt for the right university or right career path. So that was my starting point. My initial training is as a programmer. I completed my undergrad in computer science, and somehow I never actually fit into that world. So 15 years back, I got an opportunity to get into teaching. And like I said, it's a process of realizing what's your true passion is. And it sounds very, overdone and repeated again and again, find your true passion. I would like to link it to something like kind of find a personal connection to what you do. So, like I said, myself having faced such a situation, if I'm given an opportunity to make a small change into a student's life, I would grab that opportunity, right? So, with a bit of background in teaching and the ability to access higher education, I did devote and invest a lot of time into joining university conversations, getting myself professionally competent to be able to do this, attending workshops across the world, grabbing any opportunity to learn more about what it takes to get to tertiary education. And once I did that, I traveled internationally. I got a job in Uganda. So my first task, my first challenge was to set up a careers department in Africa, in Uganda, in our school. It was exciting, but we, of course, were very short of resources at that time. Pulling universities to our school was a mammoth task. But to be honest, when you start something new with a lot of energy and motivation, kind of the universe conspires. And here I would like to also take this opportunity to thank all those lovely university officers, university representatives, and in fact, that's how I met you. I've met wonderful people across the world who are putting in so much of energy to help students. All students and families have to do is access this information, be be tech savvy, be open to conversations, find out whom you can ask your questions to make an informed decision. So that was kind of my beginning into counseling. And like you said, I've come a long way. The first success was the first year that we started the careers department. All my students were placed in universities across the world, from Asia to Europe to North America. And so it was a great success story. And they went to universities where they wanted to go rather than me telling them where they have to go, or probably somebody else hijacking their decision. So I think that itself was a big victory. Then the other thing was bringing universities to our school. Technology, yes, we had started making a lot of progress with technology, but physical appearance and somebody visiting and talking to students makes a massive difference. If you can put a face to a name, if you know that that makes a journey. Competing against the entire world. It's rather a competition with yourself. Fahad, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah, there was a lag in the middle, but yes, I can now. Yeah. I think you were breaking up a little bit, Shweta, there, talking about technology and universities coming physically, and I think we've lost Shweta, and it's quite ironic because the point that she was trying to make there was that obviously with the advent of technology, we've got these webinars, we've got the internet, and there's an abundance of opportunities for students to interact with universities from a virtual point of view. But again, there's no two ways about technology. Shweta, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, you're right. I mean, depending completely on technology. It's
ironic. This is exactly the point that you were making, that although technology is there, there's no comparison of a face-to-face interaction. So it was funny. Yeah. Can you hear me? I think we are having
technical. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay, so I was just talking about my journey as a counselor. So this keeps me actually motivated, seeing how students succeed at the end of their school life, how they're able to maximize what they have learned in high school and take it to university. One big takeaway to whoever is listening to this broadcast is, to allow students to find out their own path. That has been my biggest learning personally, and also when I see students succeed in their careers. So, dig for gold, but don't dig outside, dig within. You are always having a competition with yourself, not the entire world. That's something very important.
Okay. And Shweta, like you mentioned, obviously you've traveled extensively, you've worked across 4 countries, you've come across students from all sorts of backgrounds, and there's something that always strikes me, especially when I go attend exhibitions and meet students, etc. So if I was to ask you, is guidance counseling a privilege Because obviously when we look at schools around the world, in Africa, in South Asia, there's a huge variation, from the basic public school to a multinational, international school where they have all sorts of resources and support. So when it comes to guidance counseling, would you say, it is a privilege in itself, or do you think guidance counseling is something that can be incorporated in all elements of learning and development?
That's an excellent question. In fact, that's a struggle I face when I am moving from one country to the other. I'll just give you an example. It's very easy to find a job as an educator, but to find a job as a counselor, especially a college counselor, is equally challenging. So there is a need, but like you said, it's probably for certain privileged students. If you look at international education, sometimes there is a criticism that it's for the elitist. So if you look at it, the access is limited. Technology to some extent is an equalizer, but then if somebody goes out of their way to volunteer to help students, that would be the next paradigm, crossing the next paradigm, making sure that with technology, you're able to help each and every one of those students who are interested to know more about how university applications work, or how generally international education is accessible. So yes, the conversation is on, and I've seen a lot of progress since the time I got into this career. In fact, like I said, I started off setting up a department because I saw the need. I put through a proposal, and the management agreed. They had a bigger picture in mind. They had the vision to do it, so that was possible. To find this perfect combination is not that easy. So, in fact, in one of the CIS forums and conferences that I was interacting with other counselors across the world and university representatives, this was the topic of my workshop, where I said the challenges that university counselors face. First is, in many schools, it's not even a full-time job. So if you're expecting to bring this facility, this privilege to your school, you have to open up your recruitment policy. You have to look at what's your vision, where you want to finance, and how you want your education to be accessible to all students. So there are a lot of players into just facilitating counseling in school.
And when we look at sort of the job of a guidance counselor, I guess it varies a great deal from school to school, from network to network, based on what they do on a daily basis. Like you said, in many places it's not even a full-time job. So what would you say, like in terms of your current role, for example, or the previous roles you've had, how has it been divided in terms of sort of guiding students on international university choices or local university choices, or does it come down to sort of subject selection or career selection, or how is it sort of structured?
Yeah, thank you for asking this question, because the perception generally is that this kind of guidance or consultancy is required in the final year of schooling, which is very wrong, because it starts very early on, sometime in grade 8 or grade 9. So if a structure is put in place where students already start analyzing what they are good at, what their skills are, introducing psychometric tests early on so that students are able to realize their skills, the process should start ideally very early. If schools realize that, they do hire a full-time counselor. But if you look at the history of all counseling jobs internationally, it is always, or has been mostly, a part-time job, unless we are looking at a big school which can fund this kind of a position. So in my case, I deliberately made it into a marriage. I am responsible for grades 11s and 12s. I'm the diploma program coordinator for the International Baccalaureate program. And what it demands of me is to guide students for university choices. So you mentioned subject choices. It should happen early on in grade 9 and 10. You should not be coming into grade 11 and then just taking on subjects because your teachers think you're good at it. You should have a clear, informed decision at the end of grade 10. You should know what the possibilities are, what the entry requirements are. So here is where a counselor comes into use. And being a coordinator, managing the entire program, you also know how to integrate counseling into the schooling timetable. So I would say it's always been a perfect marriage for me. In that sense, I've been able to overcome many hurdles. But counselors who just have the skill or the job profile of being a college counselor find it much more difficult to just survive or just to carry ahead their jobs and make it more viable to for schools to recruit them. So it is hard surviving just as a counselor. You have to up your skills. You are in the education industry. You have to learn more and somehow broaden your entire profile.
Yeah, yeah. And when it comes to sort of curriculum, your own personal experience has been across 3 different curricula, if I'm not wrong. And
Yeah.
a lot of times what we get asked by parents or students is, what's the difference between IB and A levels? Which one is better? From an American high school diploma to an A level, which curriculum is up and coming? Which one is better? So you're currently the lead for IB, diploma in your current school in Guangzhou in China. So what is your take on these different curriculums that are out there in international schools?
Again, a very good question. You're spot on with the questions, I must say. So this is something I get asked a lot. Of course, right now I'm associated with the IB curriculum, so I truly believe in the philosophy and I would promote the curriculum more. But as a counselor, what I would say is opt for a curriculum that suits you and what kind of student you are. When it comes to the IB curriculum, you are looking at the breadth of knowledge. You have to take subjects from different groups, all the 6 and 7 groups. So it's not a cup of tea for everyone. If you already know what you want to specialize in and you can take fewer subjects to get into that specialization, you do not have to do the IB diploma program if something else is available to you or if something else suits you more. Then we can also look at the cost implication. If I look at national curriculum, if students passing out from national curriculum, they are equally successful. It's what you desire as a learner. When students come to me asking this question, I would like to see whether they are interested in pursuing knowledge or developing skills. So here is a big difference. The IB I would say is more skill based, and it promotes developing life skills. And that's why I love the curriculum a lot. And at this point, I'm not comparing, but also I think it completely depends on your personal choices and how you match your needs to what the curriculum is providing. If you think of if you want to develop life skills and you're interested in research, you're interested in how universities teach, then of course the IB diploma program is a great fit for you.
Yeah. And I guess it's not just about the curriculum itself, like you said, it's about the resources that are available, the school itself, the teachers, the entire environment and how students make the most out of any curriculum. Like you said, the national curriculums could be equally good if they're complemented in the right way and the students are focused in learning, developing themselves. So
and again, sorry, go ahead.
Go on. No, go on.
I just want to reinforce on that point, which I said earlier. Find out what your interests are and then match them up with what's available. Don't go by, popular choice or this is the right thing to do. Do an introspection, be more informed, make informed choices.
Absolutely. And sort of moving on to your own sort of personal experience, you've recently moved to China and all this situation has kicked off and you're currently in China and you've seen firsthand how the COVID-19 crisis has sort of evolved and obviously China being the epicenter of all of this. So tell us a little bit about your own personal experience of of being in China in this time, and how you're coping with, obviously adjusting to new country itself would be challenging, but on top of that you have this COVID-19 situation.
Yeah, I would like to start off with when I landed in China. In fact, this is my 5th country that I'm staying in. So I obviously love the change and the positive things that change brings along with it. I crave for a change. So in the pursuit of, finding something new, I got into China. I got a good job opportunity. I took it on. And when I landed here, it was a very soft landing. Just to give you an example, wherever I have moved, it has taken me 3 to 4 weeks just to find a house, get my internet done, or get a phone connection, get a bank account. In China, I did it in 3 days.
Wow.
So it was, amazing experience settling in. I was assigned a full-time teacher assistant who had helped me throughout to settle in, and was with me when I arrived till the time I cooked my first meal. So that is how smooth my transition in this country was. What the point I'm trying to make is, I think here it's very goal driven and process oriented. So people know what exactly to do whenever they're told to do it. And that now brings me to the COVID-19 situation. Trust me, when I left this country for the winter vacations, let me just explain how China was during the whole COVID-19 situation.
Yeah.
So the winter vacations, especially schools, had started in December, around 15th to 20th of December, and teachers and students had traveled. And we were supposed to come back end of January. The reason being the Chinese New Year holidays this year coincided with the Christian New Year holidays. So we had a long holiday, a 6-week holiday. And we were warned that if you stay in China, you're going to see the biggest human migration ever because people travel. So put that context in mind, and then suddenly there's a virus in the middle of this holiday. I started getting information sometime middle of January from the office that be warned that there'll be travel restrictions, so plan your travel accordingly. End of January, I was asked to update my position, my location every day. Location and my health condition. I think we have a question. So should we stop for a question or just continue?
Yeah. So this is from Amar, a really good friend of mine. He works at Warwick University.
Okay.
And I guess it'll be a good question for you, Shweta.
Is it correct to think IB students are more attracted to US curriculum than the UK? I ask this because some IB. I actually do not agree with this. I think it depends on your cultural background and your family background. I'm not biased, but there's a certain inclination of certain cultures to move towards US. But people who have family in UK, who have traveled in UK, are looking for quality education, have always opted for UK. There is no saying that it's only IB students who are looking for a US education. IB students, in fact, have the opportunity to apply anywhere. And most recently, the inclination has been more towards Europe. There are a lot of amazing opportunities opening up in the Netherlands, elsewhere in Europe. So people are finding out more about it. There is a slight shift from the US universities to the Canadian ones. So it changes every year. The dynamic changes every year. It'll be wrong to say that IB students are inclined towards US universities. I would say it also depends on the universities, how they are able to reach these schools. If you have 2 or 3 UK universities visiting you regularly in a year, the inclination would be more towards UK.
Yeah. And I guess on that same point, Shweta, what I'd like to ask you is, obviously, like in your experience of having worked in now 5 countries and thousands of students would have gained from your insights and your guidance. when it comes to different countries and study destinations, so we've got UK, Canada, Australia, US, all these countries are, Turkey is now emerging as well, Europe to some extent, all these countries are really active when it comes to reaching out to schools and visiting countries, etc. And what I'd like to ask you is, obviously you've had a obviously 360 view on students from the time that they apply and hopefully to the time that they graduate and come back. So when if you were to compare in a very quick manner between the different study destinations, I'm sure it'll be quite hard to do, but what would you say the key differences are, when it comes to UK, US, Canada, or Australia, based on your interaction with universities and the admission systems, but also in terms of when the students graduate and come back and what they feed back to you?
So I think there are many factors which influence this. The first is the kind of visa that the country provides. So this has been an ongoing conversation, whether you can stay after you complete your studies to work for a few years. I was just reading that comment, sorry, I got distracted. But what I have seen is students who haven't decided they're still open to career options. They do well in universities which allow them a choice. You can double major here, you can pick and mix, match, and create your own kind of program. So those students really thrive in these kind of universities. But students who need more guidance, more structure, they would really be successful in the UK. So it also depends on the personality of the student. And to be honest, someone who has graduated from a UK university, not necessarily they will live in UK or stay in UK forever. The trend that I have seen is of this global citizen emerging. In fact, they do not want to stay at the place where they have completed their graduation. They would love to travel. They would love to experience the other country, the other culture, and the other university out there. So it'll be very hard to say that students graduating from this country are more successful. I would not, I would disagree completely. That's not even a conversation. But again, it's a best fit program. That's why it needs to start early. You need to recognize what you're good at, what your skills are, what your need is, and where you will thrive. I've had students changing universities, just not because the university is not right, just because the country is not the right place for them.
And when we look at careers and employability, careers of the future and how technology is changing everything, we often hear that kids today are studying towards or training towards jobs that don't exist right now. So based on your own experience, what would you say are sort of the emerging careers of tomorrow? And do you really think that when we say that the job market is going to completely change and university education as it is today is going to become obsolete in times to come based on the changes that are happening? Or what is your take on that?
Yeah, again, a very good question. I don't think university education will become obsolete. That's one thing we can be sure of. Yes, jobs that will come up in the future, we are not training our students for that. We can't train our students for something that we don't know will happen in the future. But isn't that something that we all have gone through? I never thought that I'll be training for a counselor. So I figured out my way as and when the opportunity came through. But what really helps is, if you teach your student to adapt, to solve problems. We keep talking about problem solving skills, critical thinking, research skills. These are very important. I'll give you an example. A lot of parents and students believe in doing mental math, calculating quickly. So you give them any long number and they are able to do it within seconds. But then you tell them to solve a problem, a mathematical problem, and they struggle. Real life is about solving problems. To do a fast calculation, we have calculators. So if you think forward, if you think of preparing students for the future, you have to teach them these skills, problem solving skills, ability to make a quick decision. And here I'll bring you back to the COVID scenario. I personally had all the information. that whether I should come back to China and resume working. So the decision was completely mine. Ability to make the decision has been something that I've learned as I've worked. What if we start teaching our students the same skills? So content to me might become obsolete. We are already seeing that. Textbooks are out. I hardly see any school or any education system completely relying on textbooks. Technology has replaced textbooks. So the same information will be laid out to students in different ways. That's how we will see the education scenario emerging. Blended learning is the way forward, where you still have some contact with a tutor or a mentor or somebody who guides you, but mostly you have to do your learning yourself. You have to be independent, you have to be organized, and this whole process of online teaching has given me an insight into that. In fact, I'd like to mention that we've been teaching online for the past 12 weeks now. So while, you know, there are people who are already tired of online teaching within 3 or 4 weeks, it's been it's been 3 months for us. And what I've realized in this process is students who are absolutely motivated, intrinsically motivated to learn, make the most of this situation. And parents have a very big role to play with online learning. They are the ones who are there at home to guide students, to push them to complete their work, and also sort of look at the scenario. Now, the machine or the teacher is teaching you the concept, right? But the parent at home can push you to actually apply that. If I look at a kindergarten student, and again, I'll draw an example from mathematics because I'm a math teacher, and the kindergarten student has just learned addition. Parents can give them, you know, how many kgs of vegetables are required in a week, do the calculation and stuff. The real life problem, which we as teachers on site in school would do otherwise.
And you know, there's a lot of talk on how the world would look like after, you know, the COVID-19 crisis is over. You know, people are saying that the pace of change, the way we learn, the way we educate, the way we do business, the way we work, all of that has changed phenomenally because of the COVID-19 situation. And like you said, you've been teaching online since the last 12 weeks, and you know, obviously it wasn't by choice. That's how schools had to react, governments had to react. But what would you say, like, you know, when we come out of the crisis, hopefully soon, you know, do you think this will change the way we learn and deliver education for good? Because obviously, from a business point of view, you know, these private schools or universities, they're thinking about their resources and infrastructure and staff investment and all of those things. So what would your view on that be? Whether we like it or not, do you think a lot of this will change towards, you know, technology and blended learning, or do you think the same approach will be adopted?
I think it's already changed, Fahad, to be honest. I mean, it's not a good news for many people, but education has changed. We should not wait till this crisis is over. I think schools are already, I'll give you an example. Like, it's a grim situation for many schools. A lot of schools have closed already. A lot of teachers are not getting paid because there's this tension between people who pay and they look at education as a service, as a business. So if you're not getting a service, a full-time service, you won't invest into it. That's the first thing. So schools are already adapting. Schools are already making changes to all these crises that has been happening. Schools are on it, but my concern is with the policymakers. You know, there are countries who are sitting and doing nothing about it. And it would be wrong to give examples, but of course you read it on the media every day. This is the time for policymakers to rethink what's the purpose of their education. Are they going to create these kind of machines who are out there to just earn money? Or are we going to actually make some changes in our education so that we create these students, these learners who can deliver something out of this crisis, be entrepreneurs, create business situations, rotate the economy in such a way that things get back to normal, probably in the next 10, 15 years, because the impact is huge. So first is policymakers, second is stakeholders. And by stakeholders, I mean school, students, parents, everyone. We need to be transparent about what we are trying to achieve. If we are going to go the blended learning way, of course, there has to be changes. How the logistics are put in place, that has to be discussed right now. The parents have to buy in how education has to be delivered, and they have to be our partners. This is not going to work in silos. Everybody has to come together. I think one of the biggest learning with COVID-19 is how it brings people together. It's just not one country or one person who's affected by this crisis. Initially, that is what I was trying to tell you initially when this whole crisis started. We all looked at it as, a secluded case of some virus issue happening in a city. Little did we realize, the whole world right now, globalization has made us a whole big family. There's a Sanskrit saying, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which means that the whole world is a family. So if one person's impacted, everybody else is impacted. And it's the same situation with education. I'm not trying to be very pessimistic about the situation, but what I'm trying to say is we can already see the negative impact. The positive thing is we realize it. We are not anymore in the denial phase, and we are doing something about it. So yes, blended learning is the way forward. It is here to stay. And also policymakers need to work with schools and look for a bigger, broader objective of education, which will actually decrease the tension between education systems, organizations, all the stakeholders involved.
And you mentioned about globalization and how interconnected we all are, through cultures and through education and through all these connections. And obviously China is the fifth country that you're sort of working in, and you've worked across different cultures and communities. What would you say, like, your key takeaways are? Like, if you were to sort of highlight your experiences across different countries, do you think they've been very different based on the cultures or the countries we were working in? Or do you think education generally is very similar wherever you go? A school is a school, the culture in schools are very similar? Or would you say there's stark differences based on the country that you're in?
Yes, the cultural context matters a lot. It changes the way you deliver your education. It changes the way you look at your students and how you interact with your students. We are blessed to work in an international environment where I get to meet people who speak different languages, who look different. We have a cafeteria which serves multinational cuisine and all of it. But everywhere it's different. There's a slight difference in culture and the way people perceive education. To give you an example, outside education, in China, how they managed the crisis is also due to the fact that there's a certain kind of discipline. There's a certain kind of process orientation. So if you're told to do something, and this is very culturally rooted, you do it, no matter how difficult it is for you. So that is not the case in many places that I've worked. So yes, cultural context matters a lot. It helps you in situations, especially during crisis. With education, it's a very broad conversation because your choices are different. So for example, when I was working in Africa, even in Uganda and Tanzania, the cultural context played in a lot. And you have to respect that. That's how you learn and that's how you grow. You are catering to a completely different audience. The one thing that keeps you going is the objective. The objective is that the learner must learn certain skills. And that's why I keep coming back to skills. The objective remains the same throughout, that students learn to coexist, students learn to live peacefully with each other and learn some life skills. That's the basic objective of a school, of education and such. But when you move from one country to other, the way you deliver, because you have to respect the cultural context. In China, for example, it would be very disrespectful if I do not take into consideration the fact that uh, somebody does not want to speak up. In I'll tell you the example in Uganda, for example. Before I could ask a question, students would like to contribute immediately. But in China, my students wait for their turn. And if I call out on someone and say, "Oh, would you like to contribute?" it's considered like an insult, like I'm
Right.
picking out on someone. There are small differences which you need to learn before you're able to deliver something. So that's a big learning process for international educators worldwide. And this is something even we advise universities. When students transition from their own countries to universities, the first phase is what kind of support are they getting? Are their cultural needs being met? That's very important. Most of
Yeah.
the dropouts that I've seen, or most of the people who have changed universities, is because of the fact that they don't feel included. So
Mm-hmm.
recognizing cultural context is very important. And
Mm-hmm.
as you go, you learn better. And international exposure is paramount for anyone who wants to work outside their country or even within their country. So you need to understand how people think, respect their perspective, and that's how you grow.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, we're blessed to have the technology that we do. We're obviously, broadcasting this live from thousands of miles away, and, everyone's staying connected. But of course, there's another side to this as well. And your own personal experience of over 15 years in the education sector, you would have seen a lot change and evolve. And the kids today, in some senses, have an information overload. There's just too much information. Maybe 20 years ago, people would have to request for a postal prospectus, like a physical copy of a prospectus, and it would come in post, and you would spend weeks and weeks reading through every single page of that prospectus. But today, there's technology, there's virtual tours, there's information overload. Um, and I guess my question is, like, when you interact with students, how challenging is it? Based on the fact that they have everything on their fingertips. And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think it's a huge challenge, first of all. And that's where you need a guide or a mentor. To be honest, the job of teacher is not to lecture. The job of teacher is to ensure that students are looking at the right information. When there's an information overload, a young mind does not know where to go, how to approach, what information they are getting. So evaluating the source is one of the core skills that we teach our students. And this is the job of an educator, trying to find out if you can eliminate the bias from the source of information. And when students listen to multiple perspectives, they try to understand what is the right information. And yes, they have been flooded with information all over the place, but there's only a little capacity that they have to absorb all of this. So there are certain strategies which we put in place to ensure they do not get lost in this huge deluge of information. First, things like, I always tell my students, now this is just an example, that always research or be on one tab. Do not have multiple tabs open. It's not good.
Yeah, yeah,
Multitasking is out. And
yeah,
multitasking is out just because of the fact that there's so much information out there. You can never
yeah,
focus. So you
yeah.
need to teach focus to students. And here it's just not us, the parents. This teachers, it's also the parents. A lot of parents complain to us as teachers that my child is always working on a project from morning 10 to evening 10, and it's still not over. The reason being, they have so much of information. How do they filter that information? So
Mm,
that's why it has to be skill oriented. You have to teach your students how to look for the right information. It's no
mhm,
longer about roting the entire content and then declaring yourself a master of that information. It's
mhm,
about
mm.
finding out what's the right source. And that's the job of schools right now. And this is
Yeah.
what education will look like in future. It's the ability to give the opportunity to students to decide between right and wrong.
Yeah. And my final question to you, Shweta, is like guidance counseling. Obviously, not everyone's privileged to have guidance counselors in their schools. Let's be honest, across the world, there are millions of people that don't have that kind of, resource or, privilege to have access to those kind of insights. So what would you say, like in terms of your key takeaways? Obviously, you spend a long time in the industry, you've trained, you've attended events, you've, interacted, and obviously you've built up a huge network of resources and insights. So, if I was to ask you to sort of sum it up, or, in a nutshell, what can people do, in their lives? Maybe parents are watching this, and maybe some kids are watching it, maybe some school teachers are watching it that don't formally act up as guidance counselors, but, kids come to them for that kind of advice. So what would you say are the key takeaways that people can incorporate in their lives, in their households, in their day-to-day interaction with students, so that they're able to impart that advice in the best possible way?
I think here is the answer is very simple. Here is where you use technology. I think the access to technology is more broader than the access to a specialist like a counselor. So if you have to access to this kind of information, you always have technology. Make use of it. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is networking. I think networking is so essential. That's like a core skill in my job, but in life also it's very important. For school teachers, for parents who do not have access, find out more from people who have access. Try to reach out to universities. In today's world, I'm sure if you get an email from a parent, it's so smooth that you will reply, you will get back to them somehow or the other, by paper or by text. So the help is out there. You have to reach out for it. And if we are talking about underprivileged students, to be honest, Fahad, I do not think they are in this realm of discussion. There's a whole lot to be done as far as students who do not have access to even a device. There's a whole lot to be done. And that is something where I initially said the policymakers will play a key role. How to ensure that these kids have access. As privileged students, what we can absolutely do is inculcate skills of how to do community service, how to make sure that they include everybody around themselves. And if they are privileged, they try to bring the same privilege to underprivileged students. So first, I said technology. Second is networking. And finally, the hunger, that the hunger to know more, the survival skill, the instinct to survive. Keep it going, keep the fire burning. Somehow you'll find a way. And that's how I think a lot of us who didn't have access to any of these information have survived, have thrived, have come so far. So I think these three things are very important. Finding out more, having access to technology, make the most of technology, and be motivated, be passionate about something so that you get more information about it.
Thank you so much, Shweta, for your insights and your time. And it's been a lovely privilege again to connect with you and speak to you. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
I'd just like to thank you. You're doing a great job by, this is one way where people can get more information sitting at home, just asking their questions, meeting many people across the education industry. And I'm sure your realm is much bigger than just education. So you're bringing experts and their opinion into everybody's household. That's a great thing. It's a big way forward. And I just hope that people make the most of it. So thank you so much for inviting me to talk about my career and my experience.
Absolutely, Shweta. A pleasure as always, and thank you for sharing your insights. And it's like you said, it's an opportunity for all of us to play our part, not only to keep our own sanity and to stay productive and stay healthy while we're indoors and isolated and away from our sort of day-to-day routine. So it's just another way of how we can all stay connected and and engaged, and hopefully come together and do something positive for our communities and our wider networks. So thank you once again, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.
And
Lovely.
thank you everyone for watching my broadcast as well, and stay connected. Drop your comments below, and inshallah I'll see you soon with another guest and another broadcast. Until then, stay safe, stay indoors, stay healthy. God bless.